everyone. Welcome to the Talk with Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to make a difference in the world. Today, I am on with Nick Ogurtsov from the Tribeca ESP investment community team and the executive chairman of Lukka Technologies. Nick and I today will talk about his extensive career and entrepreneur journey, as well as how to invest in this world of evolving technologies. As you can tell, today we're operating a bit differently because Nick is naturally not on video. And it's interesting when Nick and I first talked about this broadcast, we didn't think about that. But Nick thought about, wait, what happens now with generative AI and showcasing video? So, Nick, why don't you tell the honest story of how we got to the way we're structuring today's call?
Yeah, hi. I can. Well, thank you for welcoming me. It's a pleasure to be here. When we're discussing generative AI, the topic came up of giving someone a really deep voice print as well as image print to reconstruct a copy of someone. And so after going back and forth, we decided to try this so that if somebody were to try to create a copy, only a voice print would be available, but not both a voice and image. Yeah.
And so while we're still on this topic, does it feel like all of a sudden overnight AI has become a big thing and it's becoming much more advanced than we originally thought?
I genuinely feel right now this is like the iPhone coming out moment or internet, going mainstream moment for AI, like literally right now as we speak. And this is a really, really big deal. And I can share a story. So a few days ago at Tribeca Early Stage Partners, Tribeca Early Stage Partners, we invest in startup companies, and we look at thousands and thousands of companies to invest in a few per year. So it's very normal for us to look at lots and lots of companies. As you can imagine, lately a lot of them have been about AI, for sure. But there's one in particular that really stood out to me. This was a few days ago, and the company started writing code in January of this year with 2 developers. By April, they had the first dollar of revenue of a pretty complicated product, something that would have taken prior to AI dozens and dozens of people in several years, if they could even pull it off. Instead, they used AI to generate lots of code because they were bootstrapping themselves without a whole lot of funding. So two developers with a whole lot of AI from January to April to the first dollar of revenue. And then fast forward to now, a few days ago, so it's already May, so a month into selling, they were up to, 50K of ARR or something like that within a month, and a whole lot of backlog of additional customers in the back. And all this with 2 developers and a whole lot of AI help. And they were doing something. What they're doing is actually something quite complicated. So something that just for order of magnitude would have taken, dozens of people before in, a couple of years, not 3 months. And so to me, that's it's one thing you kind of know this is coming. Like we all kind of knew AI is going to be big and blah blah. It's something else to see this sort of thing firsthand, like in real life, when a whole company gets built in such a short amount of time from starting to write code to revenue. And so it's not science fiction anymore. It's not someday somewhere. This is what we're seeing. This was this week. So I really feel right now is AI's coming out moment. This is the iPhone moment or internet unveiling moment, or one of those things.
No, definitely. Now, before we dig deeper, let's backtrack a little bit to our typical start of the show is really about your journey, your career journey on how you got to where you are. And I know you're a very humble human being, but the reality is you ran a trading desk at the age of 19. So for the benefit of the audience, tell me a bit about your career background and your journey.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to say a few words. I was fortunate to have good mentors and good parents and good upbringing, and so I was curious about sciences and technical subjects from a young age, and so I ended up going to college at a young age at 14 and finished by 17, and then went straight to graduate school. Got my master's, was working my PhD, and then I never finished my PhD. I went to Wall Street instead at the age of 19. So yeah, and so my degrees were in physics, computer science, but by age of 19, I became a derivatives trader at one of the Swiss banks, and then I had a pretty fast career at on Wall Street as well. So started as a derivatives trader, as I mentioned, but then later I got to build some of the first high frequency businesses on Wall Street, as well as later mid frequency and StatArb and other businesses as well. And I got to build them around the world too, not just in the United States. At one point, trading globally in Europe and Asia and in the United States, all around the world, 24 hours a day. Both short term, ultra short term, high frequency trading, mid frequency, and longer time horizons as well. So that was the start of my career on Wall Street.
And then how do you transition from Wall Street to like post Wall Street life?
Yeah, so so my last Wall Street proper Wall Street job was I was chief operating officer and chief risk officer of a company called KCG, which was a Wall Street market making firm, publicly traded. We took it public, got to do an IPO, and it was quite interesting. So we were doing an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange, but we actually owned about half the specialists on the New York Stock Exchange. So when we looked down on from the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange, we had ring the opening bell for the IPO, like half the people were wearing our logos. It was a bit of a surreal experience. KCG was a very nice market making firm, trading about 10 to 15% of U.S. daily volume in equities, but we're trading just about everything else, to treasuries and derivatives and FX and all sorts of things, and not just in the United States, around the world. So the way I transitioned though is we eventually, that firm was sold to another competitor. So all ended well. The stock did well, and there was a nice exit. And then after that, I got involved in the startup world. So pretty much since then, I've been investing in startup companies, primarily in fintech, but not only. And a lot of the investment that I've done is via Tribeca Early Stage Partners. We can talk about that a little bit as well, but also quite a bit directly. And then, one of the companies that I was an investor in first, Lukka, I also I thought I could contribute operationally as well, and I wanted to experience building a startup, not just being an investor. So when I joined Lukka, when I first met Lukka, it was 6 or 7 people or so. By the time I joined, maybe it was like 8 or 9. And then at Lukka, I got to experience being a little bit of everything: COO, CFO, CRO, co-CEO, and I'm chairman of the board. So, and in that time, it was a pleasure to help grow the business from a few people to our last round, Series E, was over $1 billion valuation, and the company is now growing globally and on pretty much every continent. And it's been a fascinating journey.
No, that's amazing. And backtrack a bit then to the AI conversation. Knowing what you know now with AI, like how is that going to transform Wall Street or the world you came from?
Yeah, it's not just Wall Street. I actually think I really feel AI is going to change everything. We're talking about a very fundamental change in like a shift in value across the economy. So Um, so, sorry, I didn't know having technical difficulty here for a second. So the cost of writing code is going to go down pretty dramatically, as illustrated by my example of this company that I spoke with earlier. But that's just one example. It's even today, I think half the code checked into GitHub is already roughly half is already computer generated, even today, and it's only been a few months since ChatGPT came out. I would take a wager that by the end of the year, it'll approach 90%. I bet of checked-in code will be computer generated, AI generated. And the Copilot, AI Copilots are getting better and better. This is still super early days, and they're getting better by month to month, not year to year, at an incredible pace. So so the cost of writing code is going down. Which, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean you need fewer developers, but productivity is going to go up drastically. Maybe you do need fewer developers, but then you can. The other way to look at it, you can just do so much more, so much faster. Yeah, but it's not just writing code. Although to me, that's one of the biggest value shifts. It's also obviously analyzing data and processing text. Content is going to get a lot cheaper. Content in the sense of human accessible content, not necessarily the data that creates the content, but the actual presentation of the content that's going to get a lot cheaper. Those Wall Street analyst reports, they used to take an army of people to write. And that's going to be totally, the value of that is totally going to be changed. You don't need armies of people to write that anymore.
So people will be out of jobs pretty much.
Well, so I don't think this is very different from other technology revolutions. Be it the Luddite mills of weaving in the 18th century. So that was so scary at the time that creating thread out of wool with machines instead of humans, that was so scary. But fast forward 200 years from now, we're doing fine, right? The society. So I just think it's the same kind of a thing. New technology comes out, productivity increases. You can dig a lot more dirt with an earth digging machine than a shovel. So you dig bigger holes quicker, and build bigger buildings instead of small buildings. So I think it'll be one of those things. So we'll write a hell of a lot more code, and the computer systems get vastly more complicated, or hopefully more user friendly, more capable. They'll be developed much quicker. They'll be much more sophisticated, and life will go on. I don't think this is about some. I think it's just one more of the same kind of thing. It's not like the end of something. It's going to be a big jump in productivity, I think, is what happens. But I think one really important point to mention is the current generation of AI does have severe limitations, though. It's not true AI. It's still not the true general intelligence that people hope for. The current generation of AI has no concept of meaning, or it's statistical based pattern matching, essentially. Very, very fancy, super fancy, so that it's now incredibly useful. It's clearly vastly useful, and yet it doesn't know anything. My favorite example is ask it to produce a sentence with 20 words. You won't be able to. It can't count to 20. It can ask it count to 20, it'll count to 20 because it detected that pattern somewhere. But ask it to produce a sentence of 20 words, it won't. Just try it. It'll give you a sentence. It'll say this sentence has 20 words, but then if you count the number of words, it'll be 14 or something. So and it's because it doesn't understand meaning. It doesn't. And I suspect the current generation, meaning this sort of statistical based, has I think humanity will need one more innovation, some general leap of faith, some new innovation beyond what's currently available to reach true AI.
So with these evolving new technologies, though, how do you decide where and when to deploy capital? So in the world of AI today, if you say, hey, I want to take a bet, where would the capital go in your view?
In terms of AI specifically, or other industries, or just specifically?
Specifically AI, and then let's touch on other industry like aerospace, for example, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, so AI, I do think it's similar to, it is quite similar to this, in my analogy, like internet going mainstream, or iPhone, being unveiled or something like that. So there will be a period of AI being applied to pretty much everything. Like they'll, just like originally, or like everything became a .com, and everyone was trying to see what works and what doesn't. And if
Similar
you
to
go from
blockchain we're seeing now, right?
what's that?
Similar to blockchain, I guess.
Yeah, it's very similar to explosion and blockchain as well. It's another parallel. Um, yeah, and lots of the first generation won't make it, or get superseded quickly by something that's much better. And I also think the pace of development is much faster now than in the 90s, when internet came out. Yeah, so first it'll be applied to pretty much everything, but then there'll be clear places where it works really well, where it doesn't. I mean, one thing to highlight, because it's not true intelligence, you do still need a human in the loop, because it's only like some percentage of the time accurate. It's not fully accurate. So to give an example of, there are plenty of applications where that's totally okay. Like um, like for example, writing real estate listings. Spacious 3-bedroom apartment facing south, blah blah blah. Like if 1 out of 20 of those descriptions isn't exactly right, who cares, right? Like it's
Yeah,
whatever.
that's right.
Like, and it's probably going to be higher ratio than humans writing the stuff anyway. Whereas if the military is if the military is aiming weapons, 1 out of 20 aim the wrong way is a really bad odds, right? So there are applications where that's totally fine, and it really solves it completely. There really shouldn't be another human ever writing one of those, like spacious 3-bedroom apartment listings, like, ever. But the military can't rely on it yet, for instance. Like, I mean, they can help speed up certain things, or some for intelligence gathering. First, they'll still have plenty of military applications, but until we have something true inherently AI that actually has meaning and concepts, and then you wouldn't be able to truly rely on it for some of the core stuff. Hope that's like, yeah. I don't know if I'm making a good analogy there.
No, definitely. And so, what other technology that's transformative that you think is worth investing in, or that's interesting to really for the audience to think about? Whether it's space exploration or neural link or any of that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we were talking just before this, and you were saying it's almost like we're living in science fiction, and world, and I agree with that. Yeah, because when we were kids, we would read stuff in the books that's now, like, is literally happening around us. Yeah, aerospace is going through this unbelievable transformation, most largely thanks to Elon. Not only, but largely thanks to Elon showing the way. And now there's a whole new generation of startups following in Elon's footsteps. But what he's doing with Starship in particular is like truly like unthinkable. Even at 10 years ago, this would have been like truly science fiction, and yet now we live it. Like, it's incredible. To be able to lift 100 tons to orbit, 100 plus tons to orbit at a, he's guessing, when it's fully reusable and fully operational, at something like 10 million a flight, is like, it's several orders of magnitude cheaper than anything anyone ever dreamed about, even as recent as a few years ago. And that cost jump is by several orders of magnitude, is completely transformational. That means whole industries will open up. Yeah, humanity truly will be spacefaring, and that's really science fiction. That's amazing.
But how do you decide how to deploy capital
Yeah,
in an industry where historically it's been money losing, right? You spend billions into a rocket, it blows up, and that's when you're done.
yeah, for sure. And at Tribeca, we actually have invested in aerospace, and you're absolutely right. So aerospace, I'm pretty sure that's the industry that single-handedly has destroyed more investor capital than any other industry ever in existence, because the assets are very expensive and large, and they do tend to blow up. In fact, most of them blow up. And vast majority of companies in aerospace have gone bankrupt over just historically, because they're so capital intensive, and it's just a really hard business. So yeah, it's a very hard one. So there's a specific company we did invest in, and I remember doing due diligence on this company. And after a lot, and I approached it super skeptically, by the way. When we first looked at it, I'm like, there's no way we're investing in something that's like that has such low odds of success. But then after doing lots of work and due diligence and analyzing the risks, specifically from a risk management perspective, of that particular company, my guess was that they'd have about 30% chance of making to orbit. And they made it to orbit on the second try. So empirically it was 50% success rate. But so if those are the risk rewards for success, but if that's the risk for success, the reward though is much greater. So the reward was much greater. And so mathematically, in that particular case, it seemed to make sense. But aerospace is a really, really hard business even today. There are some truly amazing companies that will come as the wave behind all this, right? So we're going to need whole new industries up in orbit. We're going to need refueling stations. We're going to need orbital transfer businesses. We're going to need we'll want to have microgravity manufacturing. Eventually, we'll have human transportation. Yeah, there's going to be whole new industries, and that's before we even get to other planets and asteroid belt. And yeah, there's going to be, the humanity is about to be truly spacefaring, and that's incredible.
Yeah, and asteroid mining, right? There are a lot of great minerals up there.
It's someday asteroids, in my opinion, will basically solve. Will create not quite unlimited, but solve shortage of raw materials to a large extent. Like there are asteroids. So right now we haven't developed the industry yet, but once getting to orbit is cheap, and it's about to become cheap, all this stuff becomes like the layer 2, layer 3, whatever. The next layers of industries are become viable to like build on. But yeah, exactly right. You imagine capturing an asteroid with 100 billion tons of gold, and such things do exist. That's and right. Transferring to low Earth orbit, and now all of a sudden we have a asteroid with 100 billion tons of gold in low Earth orbit, and getting from low Earth orbit down to the ground is really easy. You just throw things down to with a parachute. I'm simplifying a bit, but not by much. And so all of a sudden, if that's the case, then we'll be making plumbing out of gold, because gold becomes so cheap. It'll be cheaper than copper. And gold, by the way, is much better metal to make plumbing out of. It's just too expensive, but it's more malleable. It doesn't rust, all sorts of, doesn't oxidize. So yeah, the world will totally change once we develop it, and the environment, of course, will hugely benefit.
And I guess with any new technology, going back to earlier, at what juncture of decision point to say is now the right time to invest in it?
Yeah, there's no right answer, of course, to it, because you could have, if in the early days of the internet, you could have invested in Amazon, and I would have done just fine. But then there's so many other companies that have come and gone, and yeah, there's no right answer to this. But fortunately, it doesn't have to be the answer. We don't need to find the next Amazon and have a super ultra home run. We can have lots of singles and doubles, and incrementally keep building it. Because even the first generation of internet companies, a lot of them have merged and have had exits, and it's yeah. So it's not necessarily have to be a binary thing. We'll collectively figure this out as humanity, I'm sure.
No, definitely. And then let's transition to neuroscience, because I think one of the companies we invested in is Optios, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. Yeah, that's another whole revolution with human brains. We now have the capacity to measure brain states. We now have the capacity to extract information on unparalleled amounts of information from brains. We have the capability of, back to the AI conversation, to analyze that data, vast amounts of data in unparalleled ways. Yeah, and so yeah, you mentioned Neuralink, I think, earlier, but it's yeah, human brains is one of the most exciting frontiers I think we have as humanity, to truly understand who we are, how we function, and yeah, unlock the potential of the human brain. Far more like, and just as a little bit of a teaser, consider performance of someone like LeBron James, or Michael Jordan shooting basketball in their prime and in the zone where like everything seems to go in, and everything's effortless and no one can stop them, and that kind of performance. Like, imagine if we could unlock that in every human being with a push of a button for whatever it is that they want to do, and at any time. Wouldn't that change humanity?
No, it'd be transformative in terms of how we learn, right, as well, and grow.
For everything, yeah. Learn, absolutely. We could learn much better, but we can also become, vastly better at everything. Like as humans, like
Yeah.
better parents too, better spouses, better humans, not just better workers, for companies, like or better athletes. Really, potentially unlocking much deeper potential in us humans. Like, yeah, I mean, this is an incredible frontier in front of us.
And how do you come about to deciding, with all the potential with this frontier, to invest in a company like Optios? Like, what was the decision point?
Yeah, so for me, investing is actually relatively simple. It always starts and ends with people. Like, always starts and ends with people. The people in the company, the culture, they have to be the right people at the right point in time, the right place at the right time. It has to make sense for them. It has to make sense for people around them. They have to have a good heart. They have to be doing this for the right reasons. They have to be motivated. They have to have the right experience. Like, to me, to a large extent, it's actually about people. It's not that complicated. It's not about math or numbers. First and foremost, investing is always about people to me, and business in general is always about people to me, first and foremost. And then it's about all the other things. Like, the numbers, of course, still do need to make sense. The market potential has to be big enough. Somebody does need to do the spreadsheets and figure out burn rates and everything else. But first and foremost, it's about people for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with anything. It's really about the people and the ideas of what you're trying to solve, right, and having a true purpose.
Yeah, but it has to, yeah. So in case of that particular company, it felt there was a great deal of maturity in the leadership team, and they have a good heart, in my opinion, which matters to me. They're doing this for reasons that make sense, and the technology seems to have reached the maturity, tangible, demonstrative maturity, that it's no longer a science experiment. It's something that appears to be ready for commercial exploitation. So when all those pieces fit together, that seems like a good place to focus.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. Now, going back to a technology that you saw a future in many years ago, and it's now everyone I'm talking to is like, it's gonna happen. It's blockchain. Like,
Mm.
what is your view now of where blockchain is going? From Larry Fink saying, "Hey, the tokenization of everything," right, to David Solomon and everyone in the industry.
Yeah. yeah, it's so from the first Bitcoin paper to to a few years Mt. Gox, whatever, to Ethereum launch, to everything that else that comes since then, and since then lots of things have happened since then. Of course, lots of innovations, DeFi and staking and smart contracts and yeah, a whole explosion of ecosystems and exploring different ways of using this technology. Um, yeah, lots of things have happened. So to me, it's the way I actually think about this is I don't even think of that whole ecosystem anymore as about blockchain. It kind of was a few years ago, but to me, this is about digital ways of doing commerce. And as part of digital ways of doing commerce, you have digital assets that make sense, but also you're going to need to have smart contracts and payments, and you'll need to be able to do accounting and taxes and run businesses efficiently and all sorts of things. For lots of those things, blockchain makes sense. It's a really good tool for a whole lot of those things in a distributed manner. For other things, it's been tried and shown that it's actually easier to do things in a more traditional way or other new digital ways. So yeah. So to me, it's not. Years ago, it stopped being about blockchain. It just became about more natively digital ways of doing commerce. And I still think we're super early days of all this. Like, the economy today looks that we're fairly digital, but I don't think it is. I think it's still super early days. Um, like, consider how people do invoicing today. So, you know, a decade ago, it would be, on a piece of paper with an envelope and a stamp. Now invoices largely an email with a PDF attached. So that looks digital, but it's not. Like, it would just say the stamp. It's still a human, you know, pushing a button in some software to produce an English readable document, the PDF that then gets sent to another company as an invoice, and then on the other side, a human opens an email, typically looks at the attached PDF, reads the English language, types in some numbers into some other software system, shows it to CFO for approval or whatever it is they do. But the point is, it looks like it's kind of digital, but to me, it's still super primitive. Like, we just save the stamp, but the processes, what humans do, is still largely the same. So the natively digital ways of doing this would be a smart contract that, upon completion of a service, generates the necessary movement of payments and a full audit trail, and maybe there's a approval place for a human to say approve, whatever. But what you don't need in the truly natively digital future is to have an English language readable document that's produced by a human, mailed to a human, like all these things, when all you're really trying to communicate is a number from one computer to another. Like, you're just basically trying to say the service complete, you owe me $10,000 or whatever, and that's basically communicating a digital number from one place to another, and you don't need to have humans and English language documents just to send a number from one place to another. So that's, hopefully that's a good illustration of like how I think, like, it's still super early days of economy becomes truly natively digital, and in that future, I think blockchain has a huge role to play. Like, it's an incredible invention for humanity. And smart contracts will have a bigger and bigger role to play, for sure. But so a lot of other digital things as well. It's not just AI. Obviously, will be a huge. I mean, I'm looking forward to how all this stuff will blend together. I'm sure there'll be smart contracts with AI in it. Yeah, the future is really exciting.
Well, you raise a good point as well. We talk about AI, where I do see a future where AI actually buys licensed products and services directly.
Mm.
Right? There'd be a day when that happened, when you have an AI employee that actually need to license or buy products and services directly. So that whole digital billing, digital connectivity around services becomes very interesting when that day happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this day is very near. and like all these co-pilots are being built into, software development tools. So right now it's not just software development tools, but Microsoft building into Excel and other things. And but before long, there'll be AI co-pilots in pretty much everything, including procurement and purchasing and inventory management and supply chains and like all this sort of stuff. So that day is not far off at all. Like it's like I actually think today the time frames for everything have shortened. Used to be decades and then it was years. I think at this time we're measuring this time frame in months. Like these technologies are evolving from month to month to month.
What amazes me is it seems like we've advanced a lot, but yet we haven't even gone live with quantum computing. Like, and what happens when quantum computing becomes an everything possibility?
That's another whole new technology for sure. So quantum computing, super interesting. It's actually unknown whether human brains use quantum effects as part of its thinking processing. So we don't actually know that for a fact. Of course, human brains do involve small particles which exhibit quantum effects. We just don't know whether that is relevant or not relevant for the cognitive process in humans. And there are good arguments both ways. We really just don't know. My personal guess is probably not, for what it's worth. This is my personal guess. I'm probably in the camp that you don't actually need quantum effects to be cognitive, to be able to think and reason and understand things and have knowledge of and meaning. So I don't think you need quantum effects for that, but who knows? Maybe. But quantum computing will change the world in very, very fundamental ways, because we'll be able to process vastly greater amounts of information that we could ever dream about before, even including AI, because that's a totally that's a different scale. So for instance, we could, when quantum computing does become commercially available, currently it takes a big pharmaceutical company like Pfizer or Merck or something, it takes them years and years of trials, first in the lab, then on mice, then eventually humans and so on eventually. But a huge part of it is just trying different molecules, trying different chemical compounds and see if it has any reaction with a cancer cell or something. But with a quantum computing, you could try literally like every molecule simultaneously, like all of them, like in parallel, and try to apply it to a particular thing. I mean, not literally all of them, but vast amounts of molecules tested simultaneously in parallel, essentially, simulated in parallel. So something that might take Pfizer a couple of years right now in the lab and might take like 2 hours on a quantum computer someday, just simulating millions of compounds simultaneously, tens of millions of compounds simultaneously. So what that means is we might have the ability to solve problems that are right now seem unsolvable. Like, for instance, global warming, you could solve that like pretty easily. Like, imagine if you could come up with a molecule that can profitably extract CO2 out of atmosphere and turn it into something useful like plastics or something. And if the molecule is cheap to produce and the output of that molecule is more valuable than the input costs, then all of a sudden we'll run out of CO2. Plants won't have enough CO2 to eat. Like, the global warming will be solved instantly. There'll be global cooling, and we'll run out of plants. We'll be saving plants. We'll have a campaign to save plants, and we'll warm up the planet instead of worrying about global warming. But that's a kind of thing that becomes possible with quantum computing, whereas right now it's unthinkable. Yeah.
The next one is a loaded question, but thinking about this, what makes us think we're not in a matrix?
That certainly is a good question. Well, I don't think it's possible to know this for sure. We could be. I mean, this certainly could be a simulation. And there's actually a couple of things I can cite as as supporting evidence, or at least non-contradictory evidence, certainly something that fits with a potential hypothesis. So, for example, have you ever wondered why there's speed of light? Like, speed of light is a hard physics limit on anything in this universe happening. So nothing can happen faster than the speed of light. Do you ever wonder why that is? Like, if
No.
if we were in a computer, there would be some it'd be being processed on some hardware, and that hardware would have some limit to its processing. It'd be processing at some speed. In other words, updating state from one state to the next, like updating pixels on a screen, or updating the states in a computer game when we're playing a computer game. So if this universe was being simulated on some hardware, that limitation of the hardware would look a lot like a speed of light. It would be some hard limit above which nothing can happen faster than the hardware simulating us. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't prove that we're in a simulation, of course, but it's a sort of thing that some people might cite as evidence, but it's more like, it's not contradictory in my mind. It's sort of supporting that hypothesis. It doesn't contradict that hypothesis. It's in the right, yeah. But also, like, if we were, there are other things, by the way. It's not just the speed of light. There's other things you could point to. For instance, in quantum mechanics, there's the notion of Planck length, which is it's a very, very small number, h bar Planck constant. It's a very, very, very small number. From memory, it's 10 to the minus 35 or minus 37 or something like that. It's a really, really small number. But it's kind of like a pixel in space-time. Anything smaller than that loses meaning. Like, meaning it's the minimum length and a minimum unit of time. That to be smaller than that, like, nothing has any meaning, like in quantum mechanics. And by the way, speed of light is very much related to it. It's simply a Planck length is simply how long it takes at the speed of light to travel over Planck time, or the other way around. How long it takes light to traverse Planck length is the Planck time. So, but if that's the case, then again, in a simulation, you'd expect something like a pixel, something. You need some kind of a minimum thing, otherwise. Because in a simulation, you wouldn't be able to infinitely divide things. You'd want to be able to simulate some reasonably finite number of things, even if it's really big. And so, but turns out the universe really does have pixel-like structure, or appears to. Like, who knows? But as best as we can tell right now, there is truly a pixelated-like structure to the universe, which again is sort of like a kind of supporting the idea that it's a simulation. Not proving it, but it's not contradictory. It's a bit of evidence in that direction, maybe.
Well, yeah. So you're talking about like quantum computing, where you can have multiple quantum state until there's an observable state. Who's the one doing the observing?
Well, that certainly is another very deep, but super interesting question. Yeah. So in quantum mechanics, not just quantum computing, but in quantum mechanics, there's this idea that until you measure something, a quantum system exists in all possible states with some probability. So, so certain states are more likely than other states, but so the whole bunch of states are possible, and then only when you observe something does the probability distribution collapses to that one specific observation, to that one specific thing that you found to actually observe. And so one interpretation of what's happening with us is that, we here interacting, so somehow this infinite number of quantum states collapse to this state where you and I are on this call, doing this conversation. But that does bring up a really interesting question, the one you just mentioned, which is who is doing the observing? Because we're both part of the same quantum system that we're talking about, because we're not external to the universe. We're obviously part of it, made up of particles and quantum mechanical fields that make up the universe. And so if we're not the ones observing, who is? Is there some external observer that observed this conversation to collapse it down to, out of infinite number of possibilities? By the way, it's not really required what I just said this, but it is one of the interesting possibilities. And so, yeah, again, it's one of those like things that are kind of supporting. Doesn't prove it, but it's kind of supporting this idea that perhaps this could actually be like this whole thing could be a simulation of a quantum computer. The whole universe could be a quantum computer running a quantum, simulation. The good news, though, it kind of doesn't matter, though, right? Because whether we're a simulation inside a quantum computer or the universe is a quantum system that acts as if it's a quantum computer, either way, we're still going to put pants on in the morning and make breakfast. So, it's the good news. It's doesn't really affect things day to day.
No, agreed. And on that note, thank you so much for being on today, Nick. That was such insightful thoughts around the future technology, how things evolving, where to invest. One last question for the audience. It's really, for those transitioning careers and looking into the world of startup or looking into the world of evolving technology, where to, place their next bet in life. Like, what would your advice be in terms of how do people take their next steps?
Yeah, the world is changing so rapidly around us. The skill sets change and the details change, but in my experience, the stuff that really matters hasn't actually changed that much throughout history. Business to me has always been about people first and foremost. Used to be in the ancient days, it was about horses, and then later was, machines and factories, and then later we were in a data age with computers and things. But to me, it's always been about people and doing business with integrity. My word is my bond kind of thing has always been the foundation of business. If you can't trust someone, you're not going to do business with them. Compassion, I want to say that to me has always been a really important part of the whole thing. For humanity, like doing things for a purpose, for something deeper than that moves people inside. So things like that, so to me, those are the invariants. Technologies change and skills change and professions change. I think it's really hard to predict what the best profession is going to be next. I mean, right this second, it looks like whoever can wrangle AIs is going to have a really bright future. But who knows? Like in a couple of years, maybe that'll be replaced by something else. I suspect creativity is always going to be rewarded in humans, and actually more so now with help of AI. A single artist with the help of AI should be able to do much more than they could do before, for instance. And I don't think AI is going to replace creativity. Like AIs can generate nice images, but to write a story that touches emotions or to create a movie that makes you cry or laugh or that element, that creativity, I think is going to get more rewarded in the future. So I guess in summary, I would just say being a good human should be I don't know how else to summarize it. Something about being humans, being really good humans for the future, rather than details of which profession to have or something like that would be how I'd summarize it.
Thank you for that, Nick. Really appreciate all your insight today. And for the audience, thank you for your continued support. Today was extremely insightful. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone for listening in.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and it was a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Same here.
Everyone.